thank you very much for coming. My name is Hugh Aldridge, and although today I'm pretending to be Professor Stephen Glaser, Stephen, who was going to moderate this session, is not very well and was told he shouldn't fly. So unfortunately the panel have had to deal with a new moderator, so forgive me. I come from the University of California, and I'm part of a center called the Center for Information Technology Research in the Interests of Society, which is too long a name, CITRIS. And we are running a program on water and another program on cities. So that's why I'm here, is because we have a great interest in water and a great interest in information technology as a potential solution to some water issues. But before we go into the discussion today, I'd like to just go around the panelists and ask each of them to introduce themselves, say very briefly what they do. But also I think it would be interesting to get a feel from them of what they hope to get out of this summit. That's new, the first New Cities Foundation Summit. So, Henri.
Well, good morning. Very happy to be here this morning. I am Henri Saint-Bris. I am in charge of strategy for the Suez Environnement Group. Suez Environnement is a 14 billion euro company which is dealing with water management and waste management worldwide. And I am extremely eager to listen how the debate can raise the question of how to solve the water scarcity issue with new technologies today.
Thank you, Henri. Natalie.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Nathalie Leboucher. I'm heading the Orange Smart Cities program. This is a quite recent program which has been empowered by our president to accelerate the growth of these projects by investing more in financial and human resources. So we deal with 4 types of subjects, which are smart meters, smart homes and buildings, connected cars, and public transportation intelligent systems. And I must say that out of these 4 subjects, water is really my favorite, because as we can say, water is named as blue gold, and I'm sure we will see during this session why this is so much true and will be truer in the future. And in the water sector, I think a telco operator can provide things, working close hand to hand with the utilities. And so I'm eager to exchange with you and see how partnerships with cities, with other utilities, are able to accelerate and bring solutions to the issues of water in the future.
Thank you, Natalie. Mr. Zhang?
对，各位大家好，我来自于中国国家和发展改革委员会国土开发与地区经济研究所，我是这个所的所长。那么我们所呢，主要是研究国土规划、区域经济、城市发展、资源和环境。当然，这个资源呢也包括水资源。所以我到这个会上呢，就是主要谈听大家讲城市，也想听听大家对水的这个建议，因为中国是一个缺水的国家，那么城市呢也有很多城市缺水，所以我都想听大家的也好的建议。
Thank you very much. Alan.
Well, good morning. My name is Alan Henchman. I'm the Global Marketing Director for GE Intelligent Platforms. We are the technology arm of General Electric, and I have the responsibility of managing our business in water, power, and oil and gas. And I have been in the water industry for a number of years. And it's interesting that when we come to an event such as this, that I spend most of my time at water events, and we're all beginning to realize inside of those circles is that the age of easy water is behind us. And as we move forward and we look at in the perspective of cities, how utilities manage their water resources is going to become an imperative, and that's what we do is we provide utilities the information of what's going on from their water supply, what's going on through the provisioning of that water, and what's the quality of it when it gets hopefully delivered to the consumer of that water. And that's a very important dynamic to begin to understand is how much water are you losing along the way and what's that water costing you. So I look forward to an open discussion about some of the things that are going on in the water industry.
Thank you, Alan. And Alan's comment about open discussion, I do hope that you will feel able to interrupt, ask questions, challenge, even attack. We've seen in some of the sessions some attacks, which I thought were quite entertaining. So hopefully we can have a lively debate today, because I think one of the interesting things when we were sent the brief for this session, it started off by saying water is the second most important resource in the world. My view is that it's the most important, and purely because human beings can survive without power, but they can't survive without water. And so, to me, it's a fundamentally critical resource that most of the world has neglected. And it's interesting, and I hope today we will hear some insights about the potential solutions, but also some of the major issues that we still have to face in terms of water. So the first question that I was going to ask Henri to start addressing was, from your perspective, Henri, and I'm going to go around the panel ask each of them, what do you think the major issues facing the world are in relation to water?
Well, if we look at the issue of water scarcity that you just mentioned, there are three major factors that are affecting water demand today. The first one is obviously population growth and urbanization, which is a key factor. We'll come back to that. The second one is climate change, which changes the pattern of rains and drought and demand. And the third one, which is often neglected, is the fact that we change our consumption pattern. The fact that Asia is now eating much more meat requires much more water. You know that we need 1,000 liters of water for 1 kilogram of wheat, and we need 10,000 liters of water for 1 kilogram of meat. And when we look at those three main drivers of water stress, there is one that is affecting cities, which is population growth and urbanization, obviously. As you know, the population will move from 7 billion to 9 billion. The total increment between now and 2030 will be in cities. Every day, 200,000 people go into cities. And when we will have 60% of population, urban population, the question of water in those places will be even more accurate. But what is extremely striking is a study that was recently issued by the UNESCO on the situation of water in the world. They show a map, which unfortunately I don't have here, where they calculate the number of months on the globe where the water demand exceeds the water replenishment. And there are two areas where this happens more than 12 months a year, which means all the time, which are northern China and northern India. And these two areas are precisely those places that will enjoy the highest population growth in the next 20 years, probably of human history, because then 2030 is peak population and it will come down. And so you see that those places where urban growth will be the most tremendous already have no water. The water table is at 30%. It's an ecological bomb. Nobody talks about it, but that is the situation. So obviously, we will need new solutions in those areas. But in general also, as you know, urban water is lost by about 40% on average in the systems, which means that the traditional water systems that were invented in London 19th century, which is massive pumping and networks, are probably out of date. But we'll come back to what are the solutions we can discuss later on.
Thank you, Henri. I think just picking up one point that you made is having been a recent immigrant to California, it's interesting that California is on the verge of a crisis, and it talks about it all the time. But LA is also one of those places which has enough water for about half a dozen people, but there are 11 million people. And the plan is that they'll grow to 18, 20 million people. And the state probably doesn't have enough water to support that. So one of the interesting factors, which I think is in some ways positive, is that everyone across the globe is going to have to deal with water and water scarcity. It's not just a developing world problem. But Natalie, please. And I think you wanted to show some slides, so hopefully we are keyed in to doing that.
Yes, I have some slides for later on, so
okay,
we'll keep the suspense for the moment. But I just wanted to complement what Henry just said about scarcity, because obviously scarcity of water is the main issue. And just to say that in some other places of the world, that's also a problem, like in Middle East and North Africa. I had the pleasure yesterday evening to discuss with the assistant mayor of Riyadh. And effectively, that's a real issue, the water scarcity, the fact that you have shortages a lot of times during the day, that you have to bring water, in some cases by trucks, to the people, and the global fact that these regions, Middle East and North Africa, are well below the level of hydrical stress, which is considered to be on average about 1,700 cubic meters, per year per person. So in our developed countries, we can have an average of 7,000. So if you see in these countries, they have about 1,200. So really scarcity is the major issue. And for that, we need to think more about reuse. And also, I would like to insist about correct tarification of water. Because I've seen many cases, for example, in Africa, where due to the fact that water is considered as a theft of God in many cultures, it's very difficult to have the right price for water, and I'm sure that you can only adhere to this. And what happens in the end is that it's the poor who are paying the higher bill, because they have to go to water fountain systems where they pay by the liter, by the buck, because the system doesn't have the means to bring distribution to their houses. So, in fact, you pay much more when you get water by the buck and when the women are transporting the water than if you have the capacity to finance a real distribution system. So really, I would insist that reuse solutions are very important. Of course, techniques like desalinization are very important for most areas in the world. And also the correct pricing is essential.
Thank you, Natalie. So, Mr. Xiao, would you like to say something about what you see as the major problems in issues in water?
这个实际上中国的水的问题很严重，就是主要是城市这个缺水，很多城市呢是用地下水，比如说打井，那么呢现在地下水呢也水位在下降，在超采，所以我觉得。 未来中国的发展模式呢是，一个是采取调水的办法，第二个呢就是采取接水的办法。实际上这些里边就需要技术，就是接水，还有一个是农业方面的。农业方面现在中国的有一部分地区采取了这个节约用水的措施，比如说滴灌呐，和这个管道啊。 但是很多地方还是这个大水漫灌，所以呢，这个方面的技术还是需要，这个采取新的一些节水技术。
Thank you very much, and I hope we will pick up some of those very important issues as the discussion goes on. Alan, just what do you think the priorities are in terms of water issues?
I would like to take kind of a slightly different approach than the others have. Water scarcity is absolutely a challenge, but it kind of presents itself in two ways. One is the obvious shortage of water. The second one is the water that is left remaining sees high concentrations of very bad things, such as arsenic. As we move into drought conditions, we see a tremendous amount of arsenic, also pharmaceuticals. And so when we kind of look at the challenges that are facing the water industry, I kind of like to break them down into kind of these four areas. The first is around managing your resources and really understanding what is the dynamic between the water availability and the water that's left and what the concentration is and the challenges that brings to the second area, which is treatment, which is becoming, in many cases, a very challenging event. The third issue that's really facing the space is water loss, and I know you hit on it earlier, but I can't undersell the problem of that. When you're losing 35% or more out of your distribution, that's absolutely the worst place that you can lose that. You've already cleaned it. You've already pulled it from wherever it was going to come from. You've gotten it almost to the water meter, and then you lose it. And that gets into the fourth area, which is water pricing. We have what varies from very difficult water pricing models to ludicrous water pricing models. And you're right, in some cases there's a belief that water should be free. Unfortunately, whether you believe water should be or free is irrelevant. The pumping, the treatment, and the chemical costs of delivering it to your house absolutely should cost money. And being fairly compensated for that is a very important thing, because by not doing that, by believing that it's an entitlement, what we've done is we've robbed from the infrastructure investment that we could be making. And so when we kind of look at it, I think it kind of rolls back to, one, how do you deal with the water challenges, both in drought and in plentiful conditions? How do you treat that? How do you deliver? And how do you turn a dime on it?
I think we will be coming back to some of the economics of it, but one of the stark facts that shocked me when I went to California was 3% of the power budget of the state is spent pumping water from the north of the state to the south of the state. That's a huge cost, and that's just power. Treatment and building the canals and all that stuff isn't included, and still people pay virtually nothing for the water. So it's clearly somebody is subsidizing somewhere or not spending enough on infrastructure, as you've said. I think that was an interesting review of issues. I'm going to just halt there and see if anybody in the audience has any questions or any alternative views of whether the issues, or do we think that the panel address them? Yes, please.
I'm struck by issues.
Could you say who you are, please?
Greg Hummel from Bryan Cave, a law firm in Chicago, among other places. I'm struck by some of the policy mismatches. I've studied the California water transport from the Canadian Rockies watershed through Lake Oroville and then the salt marshes and all the way down the line. But I think there's an argument, at least in the States, for more federal intervention in terms of water and the sanity or insanity of the policies. What Las Vegas has done, born of necessity, versus what a Georgia town that ran out of water didn't do and had the opportunity to get water through compacts with sister states but didn't do it, is a problem. So it's a resource that needs, I think, a federal intervention, as opposed to being trapped in state laws and agricultural misuse and things of that sort. So a national water policy, and a good place to study that, I think, is Australia and some of the things that they've done with their drought and changing climate. So I'd like the panel's view on what national policies could be adopted that might make a change, because the world's too fragmented in terms of, at least in the U.S., the way water is addressed.
Thank you. Can I suggest we actually think about international policies as well, because for some parts of, the U.S. has Canada and Mexico, and there are issues there, but in other parts of the world, water doesn't respect borders. So very quickly, if Natalie, do you want to comment on that?
No, I fully agree with you. Of course, there are organisms who are trying to manage internationally, especially between borders, the usage of water, which are sometimes incompatible between several countries. And that's a major issue which can even lead to wars. So we see really that water is not only essential to life, but it is also a political and very symbolic material. The thing I would like to point out is that in Europe, what is very important is pushes that we can have from legislation. For example, we were talking about the usage also of water and the need of education of the end customer, because we are just spending too much water. That's very clear. And one way to compensate the scarcity of resources is really to reduce our water consumption. And I think that what has been put in place by EU legislation on the power sector, for example, to push for smart meters, for example, to help people see their consumption and reduce it, should be very well also pushed in the water sector. Because today we are developing projects for smart metering in water sector, but really there is no real push from the EU, and this push is more on the power sector. So we could have also some help to accelerate these programs if there was also a push. And as we are French people, of course, Europe is really I would say, the right level to have this push.
Thank you.
Another European legislation that is going in that direction is a directive, the Framework Directive for Water, which says that water should pay for the cost of recovery and also for the cost of treating the wastewater properly. So the water tariff we mentioned is obviously key. And there are a lot of initiatives which are interesting. For example, there is one in France at the moment, which we have implemented in Libourne, but also in Dijon, which is progressive tariffs. You know, that we all pay water by the cubic meter, whether it is the essential water or the water for the swimming pool. But through those progressive tariffs, we have a price set which is pretty low for the basic first 60 liters that you need. And then it is gradually more expensive for the more comfort uses.
Thank you, Henri. I'm going to take one more question back here at the back, please. And then we'll move on to talking about some of the possible solutions.
Christophe Giraud, professor at the ETH in Zurich. I have a question for Deputy Head Zhao Jingzhen in China. I traveled recently to China and I was hosted at Beida at Beijing University. And I was particularly impressed by the dimension of sort of landscape treatment policies there regarding water. I visited sites in Tianjin, visited sites in Shanghai, where very impressive parks have been put into place using passive treatment systems for very polluted waters and moving waters from quality level 6 to level 2 in the space of 48 hours. I'm just wondering whether China, which is a very old hydraulic civilization, has sought to export this know-how, because I don't really know of many other countries with that political power and that know-how, and I know that actually they've put this as a priority number one at a university level, this sort of landscape infrastructure in major cities. I'd like to know if there's been any promotion of this beyond your frontiers.
这个中国呢，因为中国北方呢是缺水。尤其是西北地区严重缺水，尤其是现在大城市，就像北京，已经人口超过2000万，所以这用水呢是一个非常严峻的问题。那么现在的采取的办法呢，就是把这个污水进行处理。那么处理这个之后呢，那个中水呢，用于这个景观的，比如说这个公园的一些树木啊，这个草地啊来灌溉。或者用那个喷灌设施，这样呢就实际上是节约了很大一部分水。另外呢有一些高层建筑，也是把这个水呢经过简单处理，用于这个厕所的卫生问题。所以这种设施呢正在推广。 我觉得这个中国的因为水短缺，所以在节水这方面还是有一些这个手段和一些技术措施。当然，这个至于在推广，因为我现在不太了解全世界的这个中水的利用的情况，中国呢在这方面正在推进。好，谢谢。
Thank you very much. So, I think that was a useful discussion about where the issues are, what the problems are. I'm going to turn to Alan to start and talking about potential solutions. And I know GE's done a major reorganization and intelligent platforms, and in the context of cities, there's been the last 12 months was a reorganization. So maybe you can start, and it's I gather it's about big data, the use of big data to manage. So please say a little bit about what you see as one of the solutions or one route towards solutions for water.
Well, and obviously I come from General Electric. We've always been an innovator, and certainly we try to solve every problem with technology, whether it was darkness that we tried to solve with light bulbs. And so today, when we look at the water industry, that's where we look again, is how can we use information and data to solve the pending water crisis? And what's interesting and a little bit different about our approach is that we have a very practical approach. Today, about 21% of all the utilities in the world use our software for the operation of their systems. And what we want to do is we want to begin to leverage the data that's farther out, the data that's closer to the consumer. That involves smart water meters, which I think you're going to be talking a little bit about, so I'll avoid that. But the aggregation of that information. One of the questions that you had in the U.S., what are some of the things that we can do? It's amazing to me that the U.S. has no national water database. We have no idea of the quality of water that we're actually drinking. Under the 1972 Clean Water Act that the U.S. put in, it only requires the measurement of water as it leaves the plant. And that's become the global standard in many ways. The problem is that, according to the US EPA, you can lose the majority of your chlorine residual in the first 1,000 meters of an iron ductile pipe. That means that through water leakage and seepage, through biological and chemical growth, the water can actually get recontaminated on its way to you. And so it just seems common sense to us that you leverage technology to change the price dynamic and the cost dynamic of water quality instrumentation, of water usage information, and begin to get that to a consumer level where then you can understand what's really happening, and you can also enable things like distributed water treatment. You can also look at where do we have a zone that is increasing in water usage. You can take that information, as we're doing in some places in Southeast Asia right now, where we're taking water usage data, comparing that to water sales data and pumping information, and detecting leaks. And we've seen dramatic reductions in non-revenue water, or water that's been pushed into a zone and hasn't been paid for, just because of that knowledge. The other things that are interesting is that today in many developed countries, they're dealing with literally thousands of miles of pipe that they've buried into the center of the streets. And what dictates the replacement of that pipe is often traffic scheduling rather than is the pipe actually damaged. And Philadelphia is the epitome of this, where they're on about a 160-year replacement cycle of their pipes and are pushing 70-plus years of their pipes. And they replace up to about 3 miles a year based off of what cities' streets are going to be the easiest to shut down, which results in replacing and digging up pipe that's undamaged. And we believe there's got to be a smarter way of doing that. If you're going to go through the investment, if you're going to go through the bonds and all of the financial burden of replacing pipes, you should at least make sure that they're broke. And that's really the challenge. So it's getting closer to the customer, and we can say there's a lot of very high-level thought of, well, if we can combine birth rates and water usage and a number of things, we can come up with big ideas. We believe that you take a much more practical approach, that let's look at what's the quality of water that we're drinking and improve it. Let's look at the amount of water that we're pumping, which is exceptionally expensive. And a lot of folks don't realize water costs more to pump than oil. Yet they're not even close, fortunately, they're not even close to the same price. And so you have all of this cost that's associated with the movement of water, yet we do it so inefficiently. And we just continue to say, well, if the water's leaking out, we'll just buy bigger pumps and we'll just pump harder. And those are not sustainable plans. And so really we've got to figure out if you're going to pump the water, deliver more of it. If you're going to drink the water, make sure it's of the quality that you want. And that's what we're really about, is providing utilities with the information that they can do that. And then the other challenge, and I'll wrap with this, is the operations of water plants is becoming increasingly more complex, both technically, but also because we're seeing a number of operators in the developing world that are coming into this that lack all of the knowledge to run very sophisticated process systems. And in developing countries, we're seeing a large attrition, upwards of 8% into this industry. And so we've got to help operators better understand what's going on in these systems and make the system smarter for them, because watching lights on a screen go from red to green and then having to rely on years and years of knowledge is becoming less of a reality in this space. So that's really kind of the things that we're trying to do, is create systems that are closer to the solution and closer to the challenge and make them smarter to help enable folks like Veolia and Suez and them to manage those water in a much more efficient manner.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to turn to Mr. Xiao, because you gave a very good segue into something that I think he can talk about. Two issues. One is the economic and social costs of water distribution, which I think you touched on, Alan. And the other is how there is a divide between the developed and developing world, the emerging economies, and it would be useful, I think, to hear something about how China, a major emerging economy, is, and I think he has some slides that he wants to show. So, Mr. Zhao.
好，这个我有个 PPT 给大家简单介绍一下中国的城市与水资源。这个图呢，就是中国的一个地貌。这个有3类地区。中国的西北地区呢，水资源极为短缺，降雨量可能在50毫米，每年50毫米以下。那么像黄土高原地区，这个降水量呢是350毫米这个以下。那么沿海地区呢，降雨量比较高，就是50到1000。东南沿海的1000以上，这样的这个降水呢也不平衡，就是西北水短缺，而东南水丰富。那么所以呢，中国的城市呢主要集中在东部沿海地区。那么这个城市呢，中国现在的城市有3座城市，已经有超过1000万的城市有3座。超过这个100万的城市呢，已经有122座。那么这个50万到100万的城市已经118座。那么20万人以下的城市有151座，总量呢是655座。还有这个一些小城镇，就是在2万人左右的小城镇，有19000多座。这就是中国的城市状况。那么，由于水资源的人均占有量少，时空分布不均，是这个水资源的总量呢是居世界第6位，列巴西、俄罗斯、加拿大、印尼、美国之后。人均这个水资源量呢，仅为世界平均水平的1/4到1/2。那么现在的用水呢是，农业用水占了68%，所以呢，主要这个城市用水呢，只有30几。那么开发程度呢，北方高是南方低，所以但是开发潜力呢是南方是很大。用水的效率在不断提高，因为水短缺，所以在中国政府对水的资源的管理以及用水呢都非常严格。那么呢，对这个 大江大河的水利用呢也非常的充分。但是现在呢，这个工业和生活用水呢在持续增加，所以城市的水的短缺呢也是日益严重。那么现在存在的3大问题，也是一个难题，也是3大难题，就是一个是水污染问题，工业的发展，所以是很多的水体，受到了污染。第二个是水超采，也就是那个，尤其是小城镇，它是用主要的水源呢就是地下水。第3个是水短缺，由于这个城市规模太大，像北京啊、天津呐，这都是水城市用水比较短缺的。这个图呢，就是体现一个，就是像这个红色的地方，这都是短缺的比较严重的，黄色的。这个目前的年缺水总量达到300到400亿立方米。全国600多座城市有400个供水不足，110座严重缺水，这个年缺水量达这个60亿立方米。那么中国政府呢，对水呢管理和水的利用采取非常严格的这个政策。第一个呢是办法是节水，这个采用比如每个城市。它的比如中水回用啊，这个水水量水价都在采取提高水价的措施，就是鼓励节水。第二个呢是治理污水，那么每个城市都建立了污水处理厂，而且呢对中水呢进行充分的利用，就是用于生态用水、景观用水。第3个措施呢，也是其他国家可能这个没有的，就是这个南水北调，就是调水。因为中国的南方的水资源丰富，而北方短缺。长江是个水量很大的一个河流，所以现在中国呢，通过南水北调，比如说东线调水，就是长江调到黄河流域。那么中线，这个在湖北，中国的湖北，然后调到这个河南、河北和北京，调北京。那么现在这2条线呢正在施工，很快就会建成，也就是把长江流域的水调到了黄河流域和北方。在西部呢也正在勘察设计，这个一个是需要调水。当然这种呢也是这个没有办法的事情，就是成本也很高，那个1方水大概是1美元的成本，1调水的成本。当然这是对于一个大量人口聚集的城市来讲，这是非常必要的。否则的话，一旦降水不足的话，那么1000万人的城市饮水问题就成为一个大问题。当然了，这个现在很多产业集中到沿海地区，那么呢，很多产业用水呢，将来利用海水淡化。中国的海水淡化技术呢也比较高，那么但是淡化的成本呢，1方水呢也是1美元左右，所以这个已经工业可以承受了，就是产业可以承受。当然第3个就是对污水处理厂的这个中水，提高利用率，这是中国的这个解决水问题的一个3大对策吧。谢谢。
Thank you very much. And I think there was a very central point to both what Alan said and Mr. Zhao said, which is about the economics of water, and how in many countries we're not paying enough for it. And I think that brings us on to demand response and a solution to that, which is smart metering and so on. So, Natalie, do you want to say a few words about that?
Thank you. So now the slides. if you can show them. Okay, so the idea is to show, I would say very humbly, how information and communication technologies can provide some bricks to resolving these issues of scarcity. I would say the two main qualities I see in ICT systems are flexibility and optimization. I will give you some examples to prove this assertion. So first, I would like to show you a partnership that we have constructed with Veolia, which is a French utility company. And we have followed a partenarial approach, which is to say we have created a joint venture together. And the aim of this joint venture is really to design and deploy massively water smart meters all over France and potentially abroad also. So we have started with the suburbs of Paris, and maybe some of you are living in the suburbs of Paris. Are some people? Yes, I see. So maybe you have received a leaflet explaining to you that soon you will get, by M2O company, a smart metering meter at your house to be able to follow your consumptions and also avoid your leaks, for example. So just to explain briefly how it works and why a telco operator is there. As you can see, you start from the smart meter, which is in your house, and you're going to want to transport the data to a concentrator gateway, which is in the center, and then to a central system. And this you have to do it with security, also with privacy. This is very important because when we know your consumptions on the smart meters, we are able to say when you are taking a shower, when you are eating, I mean, if you are in your house or not. So as you can see, you need some trustworthy companies to handle this data. Yeah. So here is really how it works, and I would like to emphasize on the fact that for me, the meter is the essential part. So as a consumer, we may think the meter is the problem, because this is the meter which is giving you at the end of the month the bill or at the end of the year. But I would like to say that I think the meter is the best friend of the consumer, because the meter first, if you have a meter, first it shows that water is coming to your house, which we have to know is not the case for all humanity. We have at least 1 billion people who do not have access to water, and we have about 2.6 billion people who do not have access to waste management. So the first good news of the meter is that you have water in your house. The second thing is that the meter is measuring your consumption. And of course, this comes to the tariff. But I would say that if I look, for example, at French figures, the annual bill for French consumers is around 180 euro. So it's not, when you realize, compared to your power purchase, it's not that much. If you realize what you're paying, for example, for your telco consumptions, which I should not emphasize. But the meter is essential also because if you have a smart meter, then you will be able to control your consumption. You will be able to know that when you take a shower or when you take a bath, it's quite different. And let me show you some apps that have been put in place by many developers, which are meant to help the end consumer control the consumption. Yeah, so I've looked through a bit of literature and on Google and found some quite interesting apps that everybody can have on their smartphones. So a lot of apps are dedicated to looking at your consumption, water consumption, but it could be applied also to power consumption on your smartphone. This one, you have this one, My Use, which is working for the 3 fluids. You have also Drip Detective. So Drip Detective is supposed to tell you when you have your faucet linking, for example. You have also Shower Couch, which is telling you how much water you consume when you shower and is trying to tell you when you should stop your shower. You have another watch or a timer, which is the same idea. And you have also a different one there, which we spoke about droughts. And here, this one is trying to, it's an application to let you see, for example, in the United States, what could be conditions for droughts, for example. So as you can see, ICTs are really enablers there. We talked about data aggregation, but you see that also we talk about a real telecom network, because when you transport data from the houses to the central networks, you need to manage that. You need to ensure a good quality of service, because once the consumers will be used to see every day their consumption of water or gas or electricity, they will want to have it every day. And for example, a very interesting usage is, for example, for the heating power. If you use gas, for example, you will be able to see how much extra money you spend. For example, if you want to maintain your temperature in your house at 19 degrees, and whether it's minus 8 degrees Celsius or plus 8 degrees Celsius. Sorry, I'm not sure about the conversions in Fahrenheit, but 8 or minus, let's say, then you will be able to see how much euros or dollars you're going to spend extra for this day to maintain. And then you might decide that maybe 17 degrees in your house is enough. Yeah, because then you're going to save tens of euros or dollars. So these are the main things I wanted to say about what ICTs can bring in to the water utilities. And I think the panel we have here is really very well done, I must say. Well done to the organizers, because here we have a utility, we have some, let's say, utilities and users also, and we have also a company which is able to do data aggregation, and we have somebody who can transport the data initially. So I think here you have really the good model of how we can accelerate to solve the issues of scarcity of water.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Henri, earlier you mentioned the map that unfortunately we haven't been able to see, but showing that the cities where the major growth of population will occur also happen to be where some of the driest parts of the world. Some of these technologies we've heard about, how relevant do you think they are to emerging economies? How affordable are they? And do you have a feeling about how we can rapidly solve water scarcity problems across the globe and water quality problems across using ICT? Because I think one of the things that we're concerned about in our research is that ICT developments are applicable across the globe and not just in developed parts of the world. So,
well, I'd like to take a little step back on the issue and how ICT can help to solve it. In fact, we can solve it by monitoring the demand, which you just mentioned. We also can help by monitoring the offer and optimizing the offer. And as you said, like in China and other parts of the world, water use is 70% agriculture, then 20% industry, and then 10% population and cities. And I think the first way to manage the issue is to manage what we call the large water cycle. It's moving from the urban water cycle management, which we've done as utilities historically, to managing the large water cycle. And to be able to get the data to monitor the usage of the different conflicting usage, and take decisions at a basin level to optimize the water quantity and its use. For example, if you are in an area like near the south of Bordeaux, where you grow a lot of crop, corn, you are in conflict with the people who go down the river, down the Dordogne, and you are in conflict with the cities and the industries who pump the water. So the first level of thinking should be, should we grow corn in that area, or should we grow something else? Because you are dealing with 70% of the resource. And I think that's the key thing. So I think the first level is managing the large water cycle by gathering data and sharing that data and optimizing decisions at a basin level, which is the normal level, to take the right decisions on water. And this is done in China, this is done in many parts of the world, but there is an institutional setup that needs to be improved to be able to do that, because it's not easy to make people talk together, and that's a special skill. The second thing in the offer is what you mentioned, is to optimize the networks and plants. You should first start not to lose the water that you have cleaned and transported and pumped, and it's 40% on average, but it can be 50, 60, 80% in some cities. It can be much less. For example, in Paris, we managed to reduce the non-revenue water from 12% to 2%. We did that over a few years and by investing in the network. So of course that is the key element, and you can also improve the service in emerging markets very, very quickly. For example, in Algiers, there was water 3 days a week, 2 hours a day, and people had reservoirs on the 5 years ago, and we came within a management contract where we had about 30 people working and training the local utility, and today in Algiers, you have water 24/7. I'm going there Monday, so I'll be testing it. But it is possible. It is possible to improve the network through expertise and putting the right investment, not a lot of money, but putting the right investment in the right place. The third element on the offer, which is, and optimizing plants is, and networks, is not only leak detection, but it's also optimizing energy consumption. And I'd like to mention the agreement that we have, the partnership that we've developed with General Electric, which was signed last year, in which we have decided to work together on developing applications that are used in the energy smart grid world and apply them to water. And it's a smart water agreement. And for example, concretely, we have started 3 projects. One in France, which is optimizing energy consumption in a wastewater plant. One in China, which is optimizing the consumption of chemicals in a large Chinese industrial park, the largest, the Shanghai Chemical Industrial Park, where we treat all the wastewater of all the chemical companies. And to optimize the chemical feed of the treatment, we have started to develop a software together. And the third example is in Rio, which has about 60% water leak. We are working together with the municipality of Rio to help reduce the leakage. And again, data here can be very help to optimize at the offer level. The third action we can do at offer level is to find alternative resources. So you mentioned reuse in China. You mentioned desalination. I know there are about 300 plants being built on the east coast of China, planned to be built. And to build on what you said about flushing toilets with grey water, as we mentioned it, I think we are going to move in emerging markets towards systems where we will leave progressively the centralized systems, where water is mostly used as flushing. Actually, water is used to transport the pollution. In those centralized systems were invented in water plenty countries. They were invented in England. They were invented in the US, and they're simply not adapted to water-stressed areas. You cannot rely on a system that will take a lot of water, put them in big plants, send them into huge pipes, put them into the buildings, get them dirty, and then clean them and put them back in the river. There is simply not enough water to do that. And in fact, when you go to Delhi today, if you go to Gurgaon, which is the area where you have all the call centers and all the development in Delhi, you realize that people don't rely on the network. They pump water in the water table, which is not great, and they put it in the buildings, and sometimes they reuse it. But the next phase is that the buildings will be self-sufficient with water, which is already the case in energy, which I think is going to be the trend in the emerging markets. So reuse technologies applied within small buildings or what we call urban hubs, like hospitals, shopping malls, airports, recycling their own water with membranes or other techniques, even cheaper techniques, to reuse the water. And so these are the ones on offers, and obviously you mentioned the ones on demand. We can obviously use smart metering and so on and tariffs to raise awareness and change the consumption patterns.
Thank you very much, Henri. The management of the bank has just shown me the red card in the 5 minutes, so, and I'll be in trouble if I don't end on time. So I'd like to invite some questions. Henri.
Thank you. Thank you. This is super interesting. Thank you. This is all very interesting. I don't think that this is on. Or
it is now.
Yes.
It is now.
I'm working with rainwater harvesting in Mexico, and I think it touches a lot on what you were saying, Monsieur. Houses in water-scarce areas actually turning a little bit less towards dependence on these things. And I've been thinking a lot about it because in Mexico City there is a lot of talk about supply-side solutions to the water crisis. No, a little bit like the kind of projects that you're talking about in China, of water importation. We already have that, and they're talking about expanding it, and it's very high altitude city, so it's very hard. And this intelligent smart watering metering and these kind of solutions that can really help. I think that the metering is a very important part. But in a city like Mexico City, where even with dumb water metering, we're not able to have really efficient metering, I'd like to get a little bit of a sense of where you imagine that solutions for demand side reduction, like this smart metering and all these things, but where these opportunities for demand side reduction are in cities like Mexico, where maybe we're not quite ready for wireless water meters with computers in all the houses, or maybe we are, and I don't know.
So I understand this is a question for Orange, for me.
I think it's
for all, maybe. Okay.
Yes, for you.
Okay. Yes, I think these systems can be put in place everywhere. The main impediment we have is really the money. I mean, it all comes down to money. And I think that this is where we need to find innovative business models so that we are able to sell these services in a new model, which we call as a service. So, because cities or utilities, I mean the end consumer in the end, is not able to pre-finance or to finance all the capex expenditures that are needed for this, especially in Mexico, I would guess.
Is it okay if we have it a little bit like a conversation?
Yeah.
Please.
How much does a smart water meter cost?
Well, the idea is that you just put a communication module, which is really inexpensive, on some existing meters. So really the cost there is not important. And for the network, the idea is to mutualize this network, for example, with the gas also, because you can use this network for other issues. So really, you have to work both on mutualization of cost with other utilities, and this is why the concept of smart cities, which is going from silos to mutualization, is very important. And it's important that water, gas, power utilities talk together and talk with the city. And then, just to answer your question, another important thing for me is really to have the right partnership. And here, I'm not saying that this is going to be easy, because we know that partnerships are difficult. We know that to work on the long term, because we are talking about long-term solutions. I mean, the solutions to your problem in Mexico is not going to be solved in 1 year. I mean, this would be totally a lie to tell you that. So you need to find partners who are ready to cooperate together and with the city and the utilities in Mexico, the telco utility, the utilities for water, for example, to be able to put in place a system that will take years to roll out already, but will be efficient in the long run, because here with water we're talking about long run problems and solutions.
So I've just had the 2 minutes, so I think I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to take any more questions, because what I'd like to do is just have one final comment. I have to say, I'm as moderator slightly frustrated. We've just skimmed the surface of a whole range of issues, and of course we probably needed at least a day to touch on business models, the economics, the issues in the developing world, the issues in the developed world, but we had what we had. So, Alan, any last take-home messages that you would like to?
Well, absolutely. I think that one of the challenges that we're going to have is that, and I think you touched on it wonderfully a few moments ago, so there's really two models. There is a distributed model and a centralized model. Intelligence in a centralized model and the efficiency of driving that model is imperative. And when we look at smart meters, we look at all the things that we've talked about today. It fits very well with a centralized model because you've got really an economy of scale. In the decentralized model or distributed model, I think there's a lot of work left to be done. I think that that's going to be the place of innovation and how do we begin to understand water usage, how do we drive through educational programs, and how do we put more thinking and more technology into that space. And I don't think that it comes through huge computer investments. I think that you've got to look at the problem and solve it with very simple technology, things that stay running, things that just work in the case of intermittent power, in the case of intermittent water. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges that cities face into, is that centralized systems can be optimized, but how do we expand that into a decentralized model is going to be imperative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhao. And I'm seeing them getting nervous behind me. But so, please, a very last thought.
中国希望学习全世界的水利用的技术和经验，也把中国的水利用的技术和经验向全世界，让全世界分享。
Thank you, Natalie.
Yes, just a quick thing too. If you are interested by all these subjects, just to say that I discovered a fascinating book, and I just wanted to share it with you, preparing this session, which is called The Future of Water, and written by Éric Orsena, a famous French writer. And this is fascinating because he has been doing a world trip to analyze all the issues linked to water, discussing also with utilities, with Suez, with Veolia, all the major actors. And it's fascinating also because he shows that already water is the alliance, unexpected alliance of hydrogen and oxygen. And I would like to finish on this poetic touch to say that we see here that partnership alliance is the center for these evolutions. And I think that telco operators like Orange can provide real support and are ready to provide a real support in 4 essential areas. First, because we can deploy and operate these smart metering networks, which are telco networks. Second, because we can leverage our expertise in the end user customers. You are all, maybe some of you are customers of Orange, you are all customers of a telco company. Also, we believe we are a long-term trustworthy company to make sure that your data will be correctly used. And last of all is that we are able and willing to co-invest with the cities, with the utilities on these projects to accelerate the solving of these issues.
Thank you, Natalie. Your last thoughts, Henry?
Yeah, very quickly, I think the positive thing is the solutions exist, they work, they are implemented. The issue and the challenge is to get all the stakeholders to understand them, work together. When we talk about pricing, when we talk about awareness, when we talk about working between private and public partnerships, this is the main challenge, I think, is to get the right framework.
Thank you very much. I've been asked to instruct you all, to go to the call to action in the next plenary session. The last thing I'm going to say is to thank the panel very much for their preparation and their thoughtful comments, and also to ask the organisers, can we have a longer session next time we have a summit? Because I think water, there's a lot more we could work on in this discussion. So thank the panel.